The village of Duskwood was hidden beneath the shadows of ancient trees, their twisted trunks standing like silent sentinels. The air was thick with fog, and the wind never seemed to settle. It was a place where the sun rarely touched the ground, and where stories of darkness and death lingered like the morning mist. Kale stood at the edge of the forest, his bow slung over his shoulder and a quiver full of arrows at his back. The village was silent behind him, the only sound the occasional rustling of the leaves. The hunters had been out all morning, and the sun was beginning to set. But Kale knew he would find no game today. His mind was consumed with thoughts of the beast, the shadow beast. The village elders had spoken in hushed tones when he was younger, warning of the creature that stalked the woods. They said it was born of darkness, a cursed thing that had once been human, transformed by the wrath of the gods into a monstrosity that could only exist in the shadows. But Kale had dismissed these tales, attributing them to superstition. There was no such thing as a shadow beast. Then came the disappearances. First, it was a calf, found torn to pieces at the edge of the forest. Then, the body of a missing hunter was discovered, his throat torn out and his face frozen in a grimace of terror. Finally, a child, little Illyra, vanished, leaving only a trail of blood that led deep into the forest. The village was on edge. Whispers filled the streets, and prayers were offered to the gods, but Kale remained resolute. He would find the beast, confront it, and put an end to the fear that had gripped his people. Kale had heard the elders' warnings, but he had always believed they were rooted in their fear, not in fact. They spoke of an ancient curse, a tale that went back to the founding of Duskwood itself. They said that a great betrayal had occurred centuries ago, and the one who had been wronged had vowed to return, bringing with it a curse that would haunt the village for eternity. But he could hear the faint howl of the wind as it stirred the trees, and his instincts told him he was not alone. He crept forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his knife, every muscle tense. The forest had a way of playing tricks on the mind, but Kale was a hunter. He had tracked dangerous beasts before, wolves, bears, even a rogue boar. But this was different. There was something unnatural about the silence that hung in the air, a feeling that sent a shiver down his spine. And then there was a movement. It was quick, barely perceptible, a shadow flickering between the trees. Kale's heart raced, and his eyes darted around, searching for the source. He was no stranger to the tricks of the forest, but this was something else. The shadow seemed to shift, not as a result of the wind, but as if it were alive. Kale's breath caught in his throat. From the darkness, a figure emerged, a silhouette of something that was almost human, but not quite. Its form was elongated, its arms too long, its head too large, and the eyes, they glowed with an eerie, unnatural light, like two burning coals. Kale's instincts took over, and he sprang into action. He pulled an arrow from his quiver and notched it in his bow, taking aim at the shadowed figure. But before he could release the string, the creature lunged at him with incredible speed. It was faster than any animal he had ever encountered, its claws slashing through the air with a bone-chilling screech. Kale barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side and coming to his feet in a fluid motion. He loosed his arrow, but the beast was already gone, melting back into the shadows like mist before a gust of wind. Kale stood there, his heart hammering in his chest, his mind racing. The shadow beast was real, and it was hunting him. The next morning, Kale returned to the village, shaken but determined. He had seen the shadow with his own eyes. There was no mistaking it now. He gathered a small group of fellow hunters, men and women who had heard the stories and seen the signs. They were ready to confront the beast, but Kale knew that they needed more than weapons. Kale visited the village elder. They needed a frail woman named Arla, who had lived in Duskwood longer than anyone else. Her eyes were clouded with age, but they still held the spark of wisdom. She had always been one of the few who spoke openly about the curse, and Kale knew that she held the key to unlocking the mystery of the shadow beast. "Elder Arla," Kale said, bowing respectfully, "I need to know everything you can tell me about the shadow beast. The village is in danger and I can no longer ignore the truth." Arla's expression darkened. She motioned for Kale to sit. "The beast you speak of is not just a creature," Arla said, her voice quiet and tinged with fear. It is a manifestation of an ancient curse, a curse tied to the very foundations of Duskwood. The curse was placed upon this land long ago by a man who sought power beyond what he was meant to control. Kale leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Tell me more. Arla sighed deeply, her hands trembling as she folded them in her lap. It was a betrayal, a grave one. A man named Solan, a great warrior of the village, was wronged by his closest friend. In his rage, he sought the aid of dark forces, hoping to exact revenge. But the forces he summoned were beyond his control, and in his arrogance, he sealed his own fate. The dark power consumed him, and he became the first of the shadow beasts, cursed to wander the earth, feeding on the living, trapped in a cycle of vengeance. Then it's true, Kel whispered. The beast is cursed, and it hunts the living to feed its rage. And what is worse, Kale, is that the curse is bound to the bloodline of Solan. His descendants are marked, and the shadow beast will hunt them until the curse is broken. Your bloodline, Kale, your very family, is tied to this curse.